2020 Misma Tierra. I hope you're enjoying the festival so far. And I have to say, I'm pretty happy today because we have an amazing guest with us. Um, so please let me introduce our director for Wizards by Dreamworks, recently premiered on Netflix. If you haven't, I don't know what you're doing, go check it out right now. Well, not right now. But welcome, Yingjue Chen. Hello, Linda. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing good. I'm really happy to be able to talk with you guys about this wonderful project. I just want to give a little background on it first. So Troll Hunters was the first in the series, and obviously, I mean, most people would recognize the name Guillermo del Toro. He's attached as our executive producer. Our showrunner at the time was Rodrigo Blas, and he was one who was kind of like in the trenches day to day, really trying to bring this vision to life. And it all started with Troll Hunters, and it kind of spun out into 3 different series, and now a movie that's coming out called The Rise of the Titans. On Wizards specifically, my role was the art director, but my boss is Alfonso Blas. He's the production designer and also Rodrigo's little brother. They made like an amazing family team on this project. It was a really wonderful experience working with all of them. One of our directors is Francisco Ruiz Velasco, and I'll probably be mentioning him a lot during this presentation also because he really like had such a heavy hand in the actual aesthetic and design of the world, because he himself is an artist and one of like Guillermo del Toro's like favorite artists to work with. Like he worked on Pac Rim, he worked on The Hobbit when it was under Guillermo's stewardship, and just basically like a real powerhouse of a person. And we had 2 other directors, Andrew Schmidt and Joan Matt, and so that's just kind of like a quick overview of our show. And I'm just going to be going through specifically what I did for Wizards, but also kind of diving into how we as a design team work to bring these characters and environments to life. So the first slide here is our character Skrell, and every time when we start a show, we have kind of like a period where we kick off like the story and we start coming out with design ideas. And it's honestly one of my favorite parts of the production, where it's on Three Below, they flew in a bunch of freelance artists. I remember like Sean Murray was there. We were the art team was there, and like a bunch of other people, and Guillermo gave us his pitch on Three Below, and he gave us his pitch. It was like 5 minutes or less. It was about these aliens who brought this immigrant story to life, and he just then let us go off and draw. And so in these like kickoff periods, all we do is just draw whatever characters or environments that we can think of or we connect to, and we really collaborate together. And Guillermo himself like will go through the concepts and like choose things that he likes or doesn't like. And it's really funny. Our director Francisco, he calls it American Idol, where we just give him a stack of papers full of different character drawings. Like we either print them out or some of them are like drawn on paper, and he just goes through them and he like checks one or like crosses another out, and he just goes through, and like it's a really fun process. And I think it's like very egalitarian. Everyone has a chance to pitch their idea. And in this meeting is where we designed this character. So at the time, we didn't really have a script. We just kind of had a vague idea of what characters we wanted to be in Wizards. So one was an ice wizard, and one was a forest wizard, and finally a fire wizard. I did these 3 sketches to start in that kickoff week, and it so happened that he chose the right one right here. And so like with that, we just ran with it to kind of execute the actual design. These are the concepts that we would do, where we did a 3/4 back and front, just really trying to nail down the basics of the design. And then we had another artist, Leo Sanchez. He's a 3D artist, 3D sculptor. He's very, very good at his job, and he's worked on like so many amazing films. Like I think he worked on Tangled, he worked on just a bunch of different 3D properties, because he's like a designer as well as a sculptor. And we gave these concepts in the bottom left here over for him to sculpt. And that's how we, work in our pipeline to bring this character to life. These sketches on the right was to help the animators because, cloth simming in animation is pretty costly. And especially when you have a character that has like a very designed shape, you have to really kind of control how those shapes perform in 3D. In 2D, there's a little bit more control where you know exactly what shapes you're gonna get when you draw them down. So in 3D, we had to go through some extra steps to like kind of ensure that the spirit of the design like remained intact in production. This second slide is of the forest wizard and like a small concept of a fire wizard here that was nixed. And basically, like, I almost always start with black and white because I feel like if it's a strong design, it should resonate in black and white. I came up with this character and he chose this one, but we opted to make her younger. And so that's why you see this more fleshed out colored concept here as like a shorter, like younger version of this character. And then same process, we had Leo Sanchez do a sculpt of this character. And you can see it right over here. So this is his sculpt of the character. He sculpts it in ZBrush, and then like when we get the files, it's usually like just a sculpt. There's no texture, there's no color, there's no other information on there except for the 3D elements of it. So I would take that sculpt and I painted it up to look exactly as how I imagined the 3D model would look like. As you can see, like our model packets get really in depth and really, really very like clear on what every aspect of this character is, because we do work with a vendor studio, and to really like minimize questions or like confusion, we try to make things as clear as possible so that we don't have a lot of back and forth. So this character on the left, we had to fix her hair, change her hair a little bit because hair sim always kind of expensive for animation. So we like had her hair be kind of bound by braids so it wouldn't move as much. We took away the cape because capes also expensive. But not only that, the translucency of it would have been also a little difficult to deal with. So, I mean, I felt like her design was strong enough to stand without those things anyways. So we edited it to like, fit the scope of the project. And here you can see some texture balls that we painted up to help the textures like really understand what materials were going to be assigned to each piece on this character. And even though like it looks like pretty 3D, it's a pretty painstaking process to like paint it to look 3D as well. These are some sword designs and staff designs to go with the characters. On the left is the sword Excalibur. We really liked the one on the left, but that week after I drew these, I just watched that Transformers movie with the King Arthur part in it, and the sword looks almost exactly like this. And so we were like, we can't use that. And so we decided to go with this one right here. These staffs were meant to coincide with the Forest Wizard and the Ice Wizard. Here's another slide on a different character, kind of showing our design process. And this is like a conversation with a lot of people on the show. It's not just me drawing. So I did these 3 initial sketches, and I got a lot of like feedback and notes from like Rodrigo and Alfonso and Francisco, and like we just keep on like trying to get closer and closer and like nail the character down. This character was eventually cut, so this character doesn't even appear in the show, but I liked the progression of how we go by designing the characters, so I thought it like deserved a slide in here. Let's see. These are some other character designs. These were for Hextech witches on the left, and they were just really quick character sketches of like, possibly witches in our show, but again, like we had 10 episodes, so we had to really fit so much story in such a little amount of space. So like a lot of these characters ended up getting cut, but they're still pretty, so I still like to show them. This character on the right is the Green Knight, and he is designed by Francisco, our director. And it's actually really helpful to have your director be able to design and draw things, because the approval process goes so much easier then, because you know exactly what they're looking for, you know exactly what the quality should be, and all you have to do is execute at that point. So this is this is painted on top of a orthographic line art sheet that I had to do for this character, and it was based on a concept that Francisco had done like in the very beginning, in that like 2-week exploration period. This is another one of our characters. It's Charlemagne, and he was a dragon in our show. And one of the things that I really liked about working with this team in particular is that there was so much focus on character. You know, when we were designing this character, like we really wanted it to feel specific and like someone that feels very unique to the world but like fits. And so I really liked this drawing on the top because it shows a bit of story between the Charlemagne character and his little baby boy right here. And just being able to add that kind of like the hint of like a story or an emotional depth there is something that we always look for in designing for our show. So this is a page of basically costume design. This character, Morgana, had already been designed in our previous show, but she had a different costume change. So this is like basically how we approached designing her costume. And you can see like how in depth some of it could get, as in with her bracelet, but also how, you know, because we had like so many great artists in house to be able to like turn and paint these characters up, that we had like a lot of freedom. We didn't have to like make it look exactly like Arthurian legend or like very, very rigid in the design. So this one on the right is Steve in his armor, his Lancelot armor, and this one was also based on a concept by Francisco. This is an example of like how we, or I specifically, I guess, because you know all of our artists kind of have like their own unique way of doing things, and we try to work with it to, you know, create like a uniform product. But we needed to design a bookstore, and it's funny because, you know, this bookstore is called Guillermo's bookstore in the actual script. I think it's called GDT's bookstore. So we just wanted to design a space that felt really unique and felt kind of arcane. And I guess we took a lot of inspiration from his actual mansion. Like he has a mansion that is filled to the brim with movie props, with books, with like all of these knickknacks that he's collected, and it's kind of like that kind of feeling that we wanted to evoke. On the left is my basic, really rough concept sketch of it, just kind of like feeling out the space, and you'll see some blurred out images here. I'm not actually able to show you because they're just like references I gathered from like Pinterest or like Google of unique bookshops around the world. And then after that, I try and translate that into a clearer drawing with like more specific design ideas. Like we added a spiral staircase here, and we made sure that, you know, it felt like a place that has a function and exists for a reason in the world. This bookshop itself, you know, it took a lot of labor to build. It's a pretty involved and massive set because every corner is like stuffed with knickknacks and like kind of props that are littered around. And it's really cool to see the actual bookstore come to life because, you know, you start with a drawing and then you go to the markup. This is a markup done by Betsy. Bauer, one of our artists. So we like to split up our assignments sometimes depending on the schedule. Sometimes like we need an artist to focus on line art and then another artist to do the actual paint job of that line art. And when I say line art, I mean like basically it's like the blueprint to building anything in our world, whether it's like a desk or a chair or like a bookshop like this. We start with line art and orthographic turns. So we do front, center, and side for props, and for environments like this, you know, we tend to do kind of more of a general perspective view of it. And we just try to imagine that, you know, whoever's receiving this model packet from us, we don't want them to look at it and not know what anything is. So we really try to fill out and build out the space to be readable, recognizable. So when whoever artist like gets this will know like, oh, this is where I need to start, or this is where, you know, this is like the vision of the environment. I think this environment overall to pack it took maybe, oh my gosh, like 3 weeks to a month. It was a very intensive process. And you'll see that there's numbers on this sheet, and it's because Betsy actually had to number all the materials. She had to number all of the props and find references, or even sometimes go into a more detailed painting of what that item is on different pages. So you're seeing one page out of probably like an 8-page markup. And like we do this for every asset in the show. Like everything that you see online on the show itself was built by someone doing the line art, someone doing the texture painting of it, something that looks like this, and someone who, you know, eventually builds it. It's a huge process, and we had a really great team that had a bunch of people who could handle props and characters and environments all at the same time, and everyone was really equal in that regard. So these are just some prop sheets that, not prop sheets, sorry, some set dressing that we did for the castle, Camelot. And Camelot was designed and built by one of our 3D Viz Dev artists, Facundo Rabaudi. And you know, he really built this monster from the ground up, and all we had to do, the design team, was to fill it with little details that make it felt like someone had put real thought into building it and treating it like a real architectural castle and building. This one on the top left here, these are kind of like the decorations and fixtures of the main hall. And right here in the center, you'll notice that the shape is exactly like the crown that King Arthur wears. So this is made to mimic his crown. Like this is his domain, his castle, and it really, like, he puts a stamp everywhere in this castle. A lot of I think this was edited later because there was some references to things that we wanted to avoid, like overly religious or something like that. But basically, I felt like it's really striking for royalty to, especially like of medieval times, to have like the imagery of the hand and the sword. So we put those reliefs on the walls to feel like, you know, like a craftsman had designed it, and this building was really like, this castle was really built with like a lot of care to King Arthur's reign. On the bottom left here is King Arthur's throne, and in our show, Guinevere's presence, his queen's presence, is very much felt in the series, even though we never really see her that much. Like one of his main motivations is losing Guinevere, and so I really wanted her throne to be a part of this setup. But you know, our King Arthur is kind of like an egomaniac, so I thought like he'd be the type of king to be like, I'm the king, you're my queen, and so we have to make sure that your throne is a step lower than mine. It's like, I know they used to do this in some other like royalty culture somewhere, but I really thought that was like a little cute bit of storytelling to put in this scene. On the right here is our round table. And I really liked the way we approached the round table, where, you know, we designed it to be a mural on the ground that could also rise up and be a real round table, because we wanted to utilize the space in the throne room and like have it have like a dual use to it. So as you like, when you first come into the throne room, you see this massive mural of Camelot on the ground, like built into it, and you think it's just decoration or something like that, but then later like you see that the table rises up and it becomes like the fabled round table. And that was also an idea that Facundo Rabaldi had. One of the funnest parts of this entire show, I think, was just designing magic. Just trying to figure out cool ways to, because we've seen magic in other things like a million times, and we're not trying to completely like redefine the concept or anything like that, but we wanted to put a little bit of a unique spin on our magic. And so we came up with the idea of using Duxie's bracelet as like an anchor point for his magic, as like a mechanism to explain like his specific brand of magic. And if you like watch the series, everyone is kind of unique in how they use their own magic, and I think it has to do with their personalities. And so for Duxie, we wanted it to be like a little bit more graphic, like versus the magic of the arcane order, which is much more like elemental in nature, because, you know, earth, water, and fire, the bare basics of like how you can be with those elements. So we did try to make them feel more magical though, because like sometimes you have a fireball on screen and you're like, oh, of course it's fire, but how can we make it feel like it's not like a natural fire? So we also added some runes and other effects on it, and the ice itself has runes on it as well. This is the effects design sheet for King Arthur's sword, and when we were designing this, I really wanted King Arthur's sword to reflect the sunlight and the sun, because his main battle when we enter the world is with the trolls, who are almost all nocturnal, and all of them are, you know, very scared and terrified of the sun because the sun turns them into stone. They're trolls. And how could humans, you know, be able to fight with the trolls on like an equal level? Like they would have to have something kind of special, and I think that would have been, in my point of view, would have been King Arthur. And so Excalibur, I felt like, should shine like the sun and have like equal power, so that when he was fighting against like Bular and Gumnar and all these really like larger than life trolls, that he could also hold his own. So that's why I added like the fire itself is kind of white hot, like kind of with the colors of the sun rather than like real fire color. There's also some like sun, like lens flare rays in there to give it even more the idea of the sun. And we would design kind of different stages to how his sword would look during different areas, like his power up. Like when he powers up, maybe like a small concentrated globe of like sunfire surrounds him, and then as it like expands and dissipates out, like you see him in the center, that he's really like in control of this power. These two other ones here, there was a scene. I'm not sure if the scene is still in or cut. I think it is in there. It's just very quick. But I had to design how the ray hits the sky, and it was like a very like powerful moment where Excalibur shoots power into the sky, and it like kind of explodes and dissipates. And so that's what these two designs are. One more. This is probably my favorite part of the process, which is the color keys. One of the things that I feel really defines our show is our use of color and light, and that's really spearheaded by our production designer Alfonso. He's really passionate about, you know, really designing story with color and light, and just really hitting those emotional arcs, but also like have enough flexibility and fun to play with like different color schemes and like even like very graphic ones like these ones up here, where it's like we're not so much focused on realistic lighting in a sense. We're more focused on like the storytelling aspect of light. And for the most part, by this time in production, we had a bunch of our sets and assets done, so we were able to pull renders directly from layout to be able to paint over them to give the vendors like the most accurate view of, you know, how we want the lighting setup to be. Some of these were painted over renders, some of them were painted over layout block-ins, and like I think this one was painted over a storyboard. So we're just trying to kind of like do what we can with the tools we had. And we probably did about, I don't know, like 10 to 20 color keys per episode, which in TV is generally like unheard of, and definitely like a lot of care and attention. As we go through it, you know, we try to really use light to make beautiful moments and design the light to that moment. Like this shot where Jim enters the wildwoods, we also had to deal with like our mythology where, you know, trolls can't be in sunlight, and find clever ways to design the light so there could be sun in the shot with a troll, but then it would be like they would be in shadow or in indirect light, and so they would never be burned by the sun exactly. And so we that's a lot of the like logistical planning we had to do with these shots. We had to do the same with this one because it's during the day, but we had to make sure that our troll, who was captured and like stuck in this tiny hole right here, could survive being out in day. So we made sure that there was a cast shadow over that area so that, you know, he wouldn't burn up, or like it wouldn't be weird for him to burn up. We would also use these color keys as kind of effects markups. Effects is we use the term markup just to basically describe like the design painting or production painting of an asset, and in this one it's the actual effect of the fire being contained by magic. So in these lighting keys, oftentimes I would just paint the design of the visual effects, and then our lighting and effects team will then take that and be able to direct the rest of the pipeline or team on how to actually build that. And a lot of times, like, I'll give them a color key like this, and they'll be able to supplement it with either like video reference or like other things that they find to like help communicate the idea of it, because obviously like it's a still frame, and in the final frame it'll have to be growing and moving and changing. So our lighting and effects team really do like a great job in like ensuring that our magic and like show effects all look incredible, like moving as well. So some of these like this one you can tell is obviously painted over a render. We had a creature design by Francisco, and it was kind of like one of those Del Toro monsters where you think it's something and then it turns into something else. And we really wanted it to have like a very strong kind of like realistic color scheme. Like we referenced Lord of the Rings a lot, especially that scene where they enter the mines of Moria. And you know, another reason we do these really like exact and specific color keys is kind of quality control as well. For example, in this shot we have these suits of armor, and in the painting of it I really played up the specularity of the armor. Like I really wanted to add those blooms and that like really intense like spotlight kind of feel to them because they're in direct sun. And you know, we had to kind of like fiddle with the actual texture of the models to like achieve this look, and it's kind of like a quality control step on how our assets finally like end up on screen. Okay, go to another. Oh yeah, here's that round table I was talking about earlier. in the show, you know, you see that it's like sunken into the ground. But then in the prologue where we're in Arcadia, you can see that the table's raised up. So it's like dual function. So the top of these color keys is a sequence of lighting. So in this shot, it was a dark cavern that would, you know, light up as soon as the fireplace came on. And we really tried to pay attention to like the sequence of this scene because he does do magic, and we wanted to make sure that all the magic and all the light sources worked together and like made sense. So I painted up this 3-step process on like how the scene would look with as much information as I could in there. In this one, you know, we were really, Alfonso especially is great at this, where he really like focuses on the materials so that even if it's unrealistic lighting, it feels realistic because the way that the materials react to it is very specific. So for example, if you look at Charlemagne's wings, you can see that there's, you know, a translucency to it. As you know, when you like have skin or when you have like wings like that, like it really brings that asset and model to life when you like think about little details like that. So that was really fun to do, and like I think a really cool moment. And then of course like we have this thing where he blows like smoke magic to kind of like show like a flashback of one of our scenes and how that would look. And I had to make sure that this smoke was also affected by this green light source, and it was affected by the red light source here, but also have its own kind of like emission as well. So it was like a lot to balance and a lot to juggle. You'll see that like there's some green bounce off of the smoke here, and then there's some warm bounce right over here, and then its own emission starting right around here. And like more kind of like blended effects shots with lighting keys. It was for these shots, you know, it happened so quickly that you'd think that we wouldn't have to pay too much attention to it, but because like when you're rendering in still frames, like you can't really cheat that much, so we had to make sure everything, you know, reacted the right way to like that intensity of fire and light. This is one of our castles that we had. I didn't have that model sheet in here because another artist did the design and the markup for it. The original design was by Sean Murray, who like came up with the design in that first meeting we had, the kickoff meeting with all the artists. It was further refined and designed, blocked in 3D by our director Francisco, and then the final model was built by Facundo Rabaudi again, and then textured and painted by our artist Andy Murray. So like just one asset in our show has like a dozen hands touching it at any one point in time, and everyone is so committed to like the detail and like just making it as well rounded as it could be. Like every single asset is really taken into consideration, and we try to just make sure to be, I wouldn't say like super anal, but kind of anal to keep the level of like textures and like quality that we want. Because with every show we do, I feel like we're learning from Troll Hunters and we're learning from Three Below, and we use that to kind of like figure out more effective ways of doing things. And I really feel like we kind of hit a stride in Wizards. This last shot was of course over a render. I mean, perspective on buildings, you know, if I don't have to draw them, that would be great. So I painted this over a base render with no lighting on it, and I just wanted to bring some really strong graphic shapes in it. I actually don't know what buildings are to the right of it. I did not have like a 3D model of the scene, so I kind of like made up some cool shapes that I thought would frame the character really nicely. And like I was really happy with what the lighting team did and was able to kind of like mimic this approach to it, and the final frame looks like remarkably close to this. I'm not even sure like what kind of wizardry the lighting team does to ensure that, but they were able to really like hold on to the spirit of this lighting key. And then we have our final shot in the opening sequence. So this one is a really cool example of how we work with our freelance lighter, Jonathan Catalan. So the whole idea of the opening sequence was to kind of mimic like really graphic Mondo posters. You know, our director Francisco like loves like different styles and kind of like pushing the boundaries of 3D, and so him and Alfonso came up with this color key of the scene where it was like incredibly graphic, like toon shaded 3D, and they had Jonathan do a render based on those color keys, and I designed the 2D effects on top of the base render, and the 2D effects that would eventually like go into the opening sequence. And it was really fun for me because, you know, I grew up on like a lot of anime, and so like all I could think of was like anime effects. Whenever like anyone says 2D effects to me, that's all I think about. So it was really fun to like experiment in that realm and like step out a little bit. And then I think, yeah, these are just some like close-ups of the color keys. You can see the cavern itself like was built. It was built by I designed the cavern, and Facundo Vivaldi built it and set dressed it. So I would say it's like mainly his set. But I was really happy with the set because at that point we only could reuse a lot of our previous assets. So this was like kind of cobbled together from like previous assets that we had built. And I think another 3D artist, Jeff Liu, also worked on this. And I thought it was just like really great how even though like I know it was kind of like fit together by existing assets, I think that we did a good job of like making it feel like it was designed specifically for this scene, and like just again being really smart about how we use our assets and how we structure things so that we don't have to feel like it's half-assed, even though it was like kind of like this scene I think was edited so much we weren't even sure it was going to be in there. And I'm glad we got to see it because Charlemagne is like a really funny character in my opinion. And again, a close-up of that lighting scenario I talked about before, and especially the light coming through the wings and all those material details. And then the final one with the emission hologram smoke effect over here, and also having the green affect the smoke. Like these ones were almost painted like triple the size they needed to be at, just so we could get all those that information in on there. Like we can't, you know, our vendor studio is overseas, so there's no way to like walk over to someone's desk and talk to them about a shot. So this is why like our lighting keys are kind of like so intense. And that about wraps up everything I wanted to kind of hit on. Like obviously there's a lot more to the production pipeline, and especially since like, you know, I'm only showing a portion of my work and not everybody else's, so I really urge you guys to go out and like look at some of the other work that's out there. Betsy Bauer, she did some amazing stuff. She did the costume design for Duxie for his medieval outfit. Andy Murray, he did a ton of our orthographics for our buildings and also like our characters, including Jim Beast, our Beast Troll Hulk version of Jim. And we had Aaron Loftus, who did a lot of color keys for us, but also did the final look death painting of Charlemagne. And then to like, I mean, a ton of other artists like Isaac Orloff, Allison Donato, and Sean Wall. Like we had like an amazing team, and and all of them were just as proficient in props and characters as they were in environments. And so I think we were able to pull it off just because of like just the level of skill we had, and we were able to get it for the show. Oh, and Mario Pata, he was another artist on our show who helped out for a while too. I think that wraps it up.
Thank you so much. That was fantastic. Yeah, I think the whole production design team has been doing some of the greatest work that's out there right now. Yeah, so let's do some questions. I know people have been submitting some of their questions through the chat box. If you haven't done so, this is now your chance. So let's start with this one. We have, here we go. Sylvia Luna asks, which are the areas of character designing and world building that people just entering the industry usually fail at, or are not as polished?
I think in animation, I'm not sure like other areas, but I think in animation, like, you know, we're taught from a very 2D perspective very early on. You know, we look at like old Disney movies and like kind of like the old masters and the greats that we really tend to think about things as like 2D shapes and like designing shapes that way, which I think is incredibly valuable. And I suggest everyone learn from that as well. But the problem with it, I think, is that when it comes from translating those 2D shapes to a 3D model, sometimes you have to make kind of compromises or like edits to the design to make it work in 3D. Because, you know, one of the examples I really love is Sleeping Beauty. All of those characters are designed frame by frame with very specific shapes on how they move and how they animate. And like it's really solid construction. Like the construction of it makes a lot of sense in a 3D space. So I wouldn't say that it's not that it wouldn't work in 3D, because it absolutely would. But there would have to be some changes to the designs, I think, to make them work and have the same kind of fluid effect you see in the 2D animation. So like for me, I think younger artists really need to focus on the construction of a character, like really understanding how that form or shape would turn in 3D shape to really help their character designs. Because like I think, you know, like I think like Klaus is a really great example of like a newer film that really focused on those design shapes and like did something that I think is really great for 2D art, which is be able to like really focus on silhouette and all that. And it just takes a little bit more effort to translate those designs to something that is more 3D.
What knows what to work on. We have one from Deep Galvan. Says the designs Guillermo chose, were they also your favorites? And if not, how difficult is it to let go your favorite designs?
You know, I think I got really lucky because he went for the designs I liked the most. Sometimes I get like a little selfish. I'm like, oh, I should have kept this design in my back pocket for maybe something I could do in the future. I get a little selfish, but honestly, I was just so excited to work on the project and to show kind of like what I felt was a cool aesthetic to go with. And I think I just got really lucky that he ended up liking the two characters I felt the strongest about also. Like I remember coming out of the meeting with Guillermo, and this was after he had chosen the Nari design, the Forest Wizard one. And I remember like Rodrigo giving me like a high five or something in the hall. He said something or said, and I was super happy that was the one he chose because I really had confidence in it from the get-go. But like, you know, I think our team itself, we try to operate on as little ego as possible. Like I've had character designs like that I've done that wasn't working for the show or wasn't working for some reason, and then like, you know, then Francisco takes a pass or another artist takes a pass, and like, you know, it's all in service of making the show and character better. And I know it's not like failure, right? If you get a character that doesn't go through all the process, I don't look at it as failure. It's just not serving the correct purpose at that time. And you know, so many of our characters are like a joint collaboration that you still feel heard even if it's not 100% your own voice.
ears get in, right? So we have one from Brunella Elizondo. Hi, I'm currently studying at Academy of Art University. What would you recommend to any aspiring visual development artist to better up their own work?
So something I wish I had done more of, I went to the Academy of Art also. I wish I had done way more perspective drawings and way more like technical drawings, because it's always fun to kind of like draw a character or like do a loose like plein air painting or something like that. Those are always like really gratifying and fun to do, but so much of production art is within like the technicalities of creating like a blueprint to be made, that being comfortable with difficult things such as perspective or like orthographic turns like is such a big help in production art. You feel less like less stressed when you're confident in like the technical part of it. So for me personally, like I still I do perspective. I understand perspective, and I do a lot of the orthographic turns. I don't include it in the portfolio because a lot of people think it's boring or whatever, but I have like thrown up other examples of perspective heavy pieces before. But it's just a necessary part of production. It really helps you like be able to understand form and be able to execute like on a higher like technical level if you really focus on those really hard basics.
Okay, so we have one from okay, we have a lot of similar ones, so let's do this one from Brenda Crespo. What would be the best advice you could give us for the ones that want to become an art director?
Yeah, so that one's a little hard for me to answer because I do feel like me becoming an art director on the team was kind of a unique circumstance because I had been with the team for so long. There was like a lot of built up trust, and I already had like a very good working relationship with Alfonso, the production designer. So I think like for me specifically, it came about more naturally, but I don't think that my case is necessarily unique. But it is a little bit because it's not often that you're on a show for 6 years in animation. Generally, you are on a show from anywhere from like 6 months to like a year and a half, and then you have to go on to the next show or the next contract. I had the benefit of starting on Troll Hunters from day one and just moving through the series, and so I think that was why they were like willing to trust me and give the opportunity to work as an art director. I think for someone coming from outside that position and trying to become like an art director outright, like it's a little different than my situation, and I don't have a huge amount of advice for, but I guess like just really try to prove yourself in different teams. Like with each project, try to prove that you are not only like professional, but you're timely and you're personable, and people will remember you. They will remember you and be like, this person was really great to work with. What about, bringing them onto this next project? And when you work with people constantly, I think they will, if they like keep on bringing you, like I think that's how like Francisco really like built his relationship with Guillermo, is that he did a really great job on his shows, and then every show after that Guillermo brought him on, he did great in. And so now, he was art director on Three Below, and then he was art director and then he was a director on Wizards. So I think it's about just doing your best at every job and trying to build that trust, and so someone will like remember you for the future. But also definitely apply to those jobs too. Like people don't know you want to be an art director just by looking at you. Put yourself out there, apply to those jobs, and just keep trying to prove yourself in your day-to-day life.
So, do your best, make your own luck. Is that fair?
I mean, it's crazy because animation is one of those things, like, if you ask people how they got into animation, I say 9 times out of 10, it's a different answer. Like, everyone's story is, like, kind of really different. Like, some people, applied on the website and they got hired the next day, while other people have been, like, hustling on the ground for years before they got their break. So different.
Yeah, and I think that makes this industry special. So we have one here from Isaac de la Vara. How much influence of the color palette you allow to shape your designs in a project of this size, or the other way around?
So I think I had a lot of like not control. I think I had a lot of voice in what I wanted to get done in the color keys, but it was definitely guided by like an overall vision from Alfonso, the production designer. And you know, the way we approached the color keys is that every episode we would have the renders or the storyboards or whatever of the moments we knew we needed color keys for, and I would go through like movie screen cap databases and kind of like pull references. Like this is kind of like a screen grab from like Lord of the Rings. We used a lot of those for like the Lady in the Lake shots, like the Mines of Moria. We would pull that, be like, what about this feeling? And then him and I would agree on like a feeling that we were trying to go through, and then we would move on to the color keys. And like, you know, his direction was definitely like, I think, the singular vision that we all tried to shoot for, but I think it has to kind of work that way because you also don't want too many voices. But I definitely don't feel like I was you know, just a tool or something like that. I think it was definitely like a collaboration.
Let's do one in that same area. Diego Gallegos asks, how do you know exactly which shots from the storyboard to choose to make the color and light the keys?
So that's actually kind of an involved process. We let our lighting supervisor team take, you know, because there are some shots that like they think that they can explain just with a reference, you know, like a reference from like a film or somewhere else. But basically, a first pass is that there'll be maybe like 20 to 30 screen grabs of either the animatic or whatever is available at the time from the lighting supervisor saying these are the shots that we need. And then Alfonso or I will go through those shots, and sometimes they'll be reversed. So there'll be one scene where they put a shot of looking someone like at the face, and then the next one they ask for is like from behind. We take those out because we like those are duplicates basically, because it's the same lighting setup for that entire scene. It has to be consistent, and we just choose one to light, and we usually choose the shot that has like the most information, so like the most characters, the most things happening at the time, or like an emotional high or low point, and we just kind of like go and call them that way. I think we were pretty liberal with Wizards and Rise of the Titans, where like we try to explain as much as possible, so we would rather have more color keys than like less.
Great. So we're gonna wrap up with a last question that I've seen a lot here as well, and Vanessa Nayeli Morales asks, aside from everything you've mentioned, what would an illustrator need to make the transition between illustration to viz dev?
So I think watch a lot of movies, because the biggest thing I think that like I went to school with an illustration focus, and it took me a while to kind of like understand this, but designing for film is completely different than designing for an illustration. Like I think a lot of times illustrators like are able to get very complex with their pieces, where like there's a lot of things happening because it's a still frame and you get to look at it for a long time. But film and TV, it's sequential. It is a sequence of events. And sometimes a shot is just really simple. It's like just the camera on the face, or like something, and everything kind of has to be a clear read. So like readability is very like important in film. And I think just understanding how camera works, understanding how, you know, sequential action works, like all of those things is really what separates like illustration from, you know, a biz dev career. It's something that I also like still have to study like a ton. Like I do a lot of what are those called? Like master? No, not master. Like I guess like I do like sketches off of like certain shots that I find are interesting in film, and trying to just dissect each shot and be like, why did they do this? Why did they light things that way? Why is the frame centered like it is? there's one shot I really love in Spider-Verse, the movie, where it's two shots actually, where you see Miles, he's looking at this glass case with the Spider-Man suit behind it. And in the first shot, his face is offset from the Spider-Verse costume. Like the Spider-Verse costume's reflection is higher than his head. But then in the second shot, when he finally finds his own footing as Spider-Man, his face matches up with the costume. So they're superimposed on each other. And it's a really simple shot. It's like framed in center and it's just the reflection in him. But it tells a story in a very film-centric way. And I think that's what, separates like illustration from designing for film and TV and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Clear. I don't know.
I think that's some really helpful advice for everyone that wants to get into visual development. So thank you so much for joining us and for being part of this talk and our event. We hope to see you again in the near future. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you everyone for joining us for this talk. Hasta la próxima.